Hi everyone, so for this hat making class we'll be learning how to block a turn-up brim and the crown, and then we're going to be putting these two together to make a beautiful hat. Now this is what a turn-up brim looks like. It always has a hole in the middle. Now let's get started. So the first thing you do before you start blocking a hat, a fascinator, is to cover your block with a nylon. This is a turn-up block we'll be using for this class. So I'm going to put it in a big nylon. Now, if you don't want to use a nylon, you can use a cling film. Do you understand? So you just wrap the cling film around, but I have a nylon, so I'm going to use a nylon. Tie it and then the blocking starts. Okay, let's get started. When tying the nylon, don't forget that the middle of the hat block is hollow, so you're not going to tie very tight. So if you watch closely, you can see that there's space in the middle. Can you see that? The nylon is sinking inside. Now once you're done ensuring that it is free, the next thing you're going to do is take your tape rule and measure your hat block. Now, this is a block, not a mold. Don't forget, it's called a hat block. So take your tape rule, measure your hat block, take 2 inches to the back. Watch closely because the hat block will be flipped now for you to see. So 2 inches to the back. Can you see that? So that's like the extra 2 inches. Then come inside the hollow of the hat block. Ensure you sink that tape rule in. Do not forget, it's not supposed to be tight. Sink it in so that you can get the turn up part very well. All right, so once you're sure that you've gotten the number for that sunken part or the hollow part of your hat block, take the tape rule all the way to the other side. Now if you watch closely, you'll see that the tape rule is free. It's not looking tight. So can you see that as she put the tape rule in, it's 16 inches in the hollow part of the hat block. Please don't forget, for any other hat brim you can just measure all the way, but for a turn up hat brim, this is how you do the measurement. Now she's going to take the tape rule back in and ensure that she adds 2 inches, so we ended up with 24 inches. So that is the measurement of this turn-up mold. Now that we've gotten the inch, the next step is to oil it. You can use oil, you can use Vaseline, you can even use groundnut oil if you run out of Vaseline. You can also use machine oil and ensure that you rub that all the way on the nylon. Do not forget, if you're using a nylon, it has to be free like this. But if you're using a cling film, then you just know you're clinging the film on the hat block. Don't forget that you also have to rub the back of your hat block too. Okay, so once we're done, it's now time for us to block our hat. Alright, so this is the crown of the hat. The top is called the crown and the bottom is called the brim. So we're measuring it, doing the same thing, and when we're done, we'll oil it and it's time to start blocking. Now this is the paper mat we'll be using for this class. So all you need to do is just take a measure. So you just do the measurement on your Sinamay or paper mat. For this particular hat, we will be working with paper mat. So she's measuring the 24 inches for the brim, and then we got 22 inches for the crown. So you measure that and then you cut it out. So whenever you want to block a fascinator or a hat, I always like to dampen my paper mat or Sinamay, and that's exactly what she's doing in the video. You don't need to get it soaking wet. You can use a spray bottle for this part, or you put it in the water and just squeeze out all of the water so it is damp. That helps with the stretching and also makes it easy to work with instead of using a dry paper mat or Sinamay. Now you can see that she has placed the paper mat on top of the turn-up brim. And don't forget, I said the turn-up fascinator is hollow. That means it has a hole in the middle. Sorry, the turn-up brim. Now once you place your paper mat, you're going to be putting your pins in that inner part first. You see that hollow part? That is the part you're going to pin down first, because once you hold that part, it's easy to do the other part. So you hold that part, get that circle, that inner circle that makes it the turn up, and then you can now continue blocking your hat. So she's putting the pins. If you look closely, You can see that she's putting it in that inner part that forms the round circle, that round part, that place that makes it round inside. And she's not putting the pins all over the place. She's putting them in strategic places. So please watch closely. I apologize if the video is too long, but it's important for you to see each step that it took to get here. Thank you so much for choosing Zofa Headwear. Don't forget to ask questions. If you have any, I'll definitely be here to answer them. So watch closely. You can see, if you watch closely, you see that the middle part, that hollow part, you can see the line is coming out now. The down part of that hollow, you can see that the line of the circle is coming out now. So she's not pulling the paper mat. She's just putting the pins. She will start the pulling when she wants to do the other part, so that the paper mat sits firmly on the hat block. All right, thank you so much. Keep watching. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in for you to see how it's sitting. Can you see? Can you see that? It is not all over the place. The pins are not placed all over the place. They are placed inside the hollow to ensure that we get that turn-up circle very, very well. So this is what you're going to do for the first part of this, of blocking the hat. So once you're done with this step, the next thing is to do the back. Now that you're done getting the shape of the turn-up brim, you're going to flip it over and then put your thumbtacks at the back of the brim. So all you'll be doing now is taking the thumbtacks round. So you've gotten the most important part, which is the inner part of the turn-up brim. That's the hollow part. Now if you watch closely, you can see that now she wants to start attaching the paper mat to the back of the turn-up brim. Okay, keep watching. Please note that your paper mat has to be double. You can use one paper mat, one Sinamay, or two or three pieces of Sinamay, or two paper mats. So it has to be double. So the next thing you're going to do is start folding your paper mat on your hat brim, your crown, or your fascinator, and start pinning it using thumbtacks or the colored head pins. And that's exactly what she's doing in the video. All right, keep watching. Now, if you look closely in the video, you would see that some part of the paper mat is short. Don't be bothered, because when it comes to hat making, instead of gumming the wire inside that hidden part, you'll be sewing the wire round the turn-up brim. So it's not really an issue, because you cut off that part anyway to get the sharp end of the turn-up brim. So you can sew your wire and then continue making your hat. So that shouldn't bother you. Okay, so let's keep blocking our hat. Don't forget that this is a turn-up hat, but it's the same process that you use in fascinator making and also other types of hats. The only difference between this and other hat brims is this one is hollow in the middle. All right, keep watching, guys. Thank you so much for choosing Zofa Headwear, and please don't hesitate to ask me any question. Now, if you watch closely, that part that she's doing has a lot of paper mats attached to it. Like I said, don't bother. We'll be cutting off that excess and we will sew our wire on the turn-up hat brim. All right, see you in the next step. Okay, so we're going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see how she's putting the thumbtacks on the paper mat. And in this case, she's using hammer because the wood is really, really hard. So you can see, like I said, don't worry if it's too short. We'll be cutting off the edge when it's time to sew our wire on our wire together with the hat brim. All right, guys. Then she's going to do this all the way around, and then I'll come and show you the finished look. And voila, this is the finished look. So you see how neatly the thumbtacks are placed. Now she's cutting the excess of the paper mat off. For some people, they use the excess in their designing. For some people, they throw it away. It depends on you as an individual. If you think you need to use it, fine. If you don't, well, sometimes I need it, so I keep it. You just have to keep it to get dried. So she's just cutting off the excess from the hat brim, and when she's done with this, she'll be blocking the hat and then adding stiffener. Can you see how neat that is? Beautiful, no pleats in the center. Now it's time for us to block the crown of our hat. Now for the crown, we'll be making use of Sinamay here. Now you see, when you want to use Sinamay, it's important for you to get it damp so that it's not too strong. That way you're not using too much of stiffener when you want to stiffen it. Now bear in mind that Sinamay already comes pre-stiffened, so you don't really need to add too much stiffener, just very light. You're just trying to make it form the shape very well, even though if you iron it using a damp calico cloth, the shape will be there very, very well. So now what she's doing is blocking the crown of the hat. It's the same way we blocked the brim, no difference. It's the same thing. So that's all she's doing. And then when she's done, she will start putting stiffener on the brim and on the crown. Thank you again for choosing Zofa Headwear. Please don't forget to ask me any questions. And also for the crown of the hat, we will be using 2 pieces of Sinamay. Alright, so like I said earlier, she's just doing the same thing we did with the brim of the hat. Now she's done and she's cutting the excess. Now for Sinamay, I love to keep my Sinamay excess because they are very, very useful. They can be used to make trimmings for the hat. They can also be used as stuffing or to make Sinamay balls, whatever it is you want to do. So please do not throw those ones away. Okay, so our crown is ready and our brim is also ready. Now let her put them together for you to see. Okay, watch closely. Ta-da! Now it's time to stiffen the crown and the brim. Now if you notice, I use Sinamay for the crown and I use Papermat for the brim. You can do that if you want, but there's certain colors that when you combine Sinamay and Papermat like that, they don't really blend together. Okay, it's time for us to add our stiffener to the turnup. Now I have my stiffener already here. That's what it looks like. It's a type of PVC glue. So I'm going to pour it in the bowl and then add a little water if it's not watery to dilute it a little bit, and then start applying it to my headpiece using that brush that you can see in my hands. Now I have mixed my stiffener with water to get that consistency. Can you see it? It shouldn't be too thick, please. You don't want to have white patches on your hat. Now can you see the way I'm applying the stiffener to the middle? That's the hollow part of the hat brim. Ensure that you do this well. Don't apply too much so that when your hat brim gets dried, you don't have white patches on it. But the first place you should apply is the midpoint. Exactly how I'm doing it. That's exactly what you should do first before you start applying the stiffener all over the body of the hat brim. We'll soon get to the crown of the hat, so please bear with me, or rather enjoy with me. Alright, so you see I'm applying the stiffener with the brush on my hat brim. So when you're applying your stiffener, please don't forget the edges. Every single part that looks like it's an edge, you see the corner of the hat that I'm applying the stiffener to, don't forget the edges. Every part on your hat brim that looks like an edge, you need to ensure that you apply stiffener to it, because that is what brings out the shape of your hat brim. Alright, let's move on to the next one. So just apply this all over the hat brim and then leave it out to dry. Contrary to popular belief, it's not just when you put it under the sun it dries. If you need to do a job and it's overnight, you can also put your hat brim overnight and it's dry by morning. Alright guys, see you in the next step. Now the same thing she's doing for this one is the same thing she will do for the hat too. Okay, so I'm just putting finishing touches to the stiffening of my hat brim. Okay, so I'm done. It's time for us to stiffen the crown of our hat. Okay, so this is the crown of our beautiful hat, and I'm just applying the stiffener to this. Don't forget we use Sinamay, and for Sinamay you don't need to apply too much of stiffener because it already comes pre-stiffened. Okay, so I'm just trying to put finishing touches to the crown of my hat. When you're done applying stiffener on both of them, just keep them to get dried. And after it's dried, it's now time for you to start designing it with whatever you want to design it with. For this particular hat, we'll be using Cinnamon lilies and bird feathers as our design. It's a very simple hat, but it's not just simple, it's also unique. Thank you so much for sticking with me thus far. I'll see you in the next step. All right, so our stiffener is dried up and our crown and our brim is ready to be put together. So I'm just trying to pull the cinnamon so that as I stretch it out a little bit so it comes out, and voila, it's out. And then we're going to pull out the pins from the brim and then do the same thing. Please do not stretch too much so you don't distort the shape of your crown and your brim. So carefully pull them out. You can use your index finger round it and pull it out. Once it's out, it's now time for us to start putting them together. But before we do that, we need to trim off the excess. See how I'm trimming? You trim off at that point, trim all the way down. Then you're going to do the same thing too for the brim. And when we're done doing that, it's time for our heart to come together. So you can do it like that, but no, that's not how we are doing it. We're going to trim off the excess of the brim right now. And when we're done doing that, we'll have to tack the wire to the brim. For hats, it's advisable for you to sew the wire on the hat brim and not gum. I'm not a fan of gumming when it comes to hat. I prefer sewing. That way it's guaranteed to last for a very long time. So you see, I have cut off the excess from the brim. The next thing I'm going to do is sew the wire on that line there, that sharp edge of the brim. So this is the wire that I'll be using for my hat. Now, taking your hat wire, you have to start sewing your hat wire on the edge of your brim. That's how we're going to sew it. I don't advise gumming. Again, for hats, I prefer to stitch. Okay, so let's get started. Taking your needle and thread, and by the way, you have to double the thread so you have 4 threads in the needle. So once you pass it, you're going to secure the thread by passing the needle in between the thread to hold the wire down. So that's the first step you need to do to secure your thread. Now, once you have done that, it's time for us to start sewing. Now, for this part, you can actually use a paper tape to hold the tip of the wire, but I'm not going to do that because I'll be using my thread to ensure that I seal it down very, very well. And you can also try and measure the whole brim and add 2 extra inches before you start sewing, but I don't measure. I just take the wire and start sewing. When I get to the end, I'll cut off the excess and finish up. Okay, so I have secured my thread. Now it's time for me to continue sewing. So watch closely, please. Okay, so I'll be using the whip stitching method for this particular part of the hat making. What that means is my thread is always going to end on the edge of the hat, and I'll also ensure that as I'm stitching, I'm knotting it because that helps to hold the wire in place. So watch closely to see what I'm doing. All right, so please ensure that you don't shift your hand downward too much when you're sewing. We're just sewing the wire to the edge. And don't forget, we'll be using Sinamay to cover the edge of this hat brim. All right, so pass your needle through, bring it out, and then ensure you you knot so that you can hold the wire down. Okay, please watch closely again. So I'm going to push my hand about, let's say, half an inch further. If you look closely, you'll see that I'm placing the wire right on the edge of that hat brim. Not inside, not outside, directly on the edge of that hat brim. And I'm not spacing out too much. Now when you do that, you see, I have just created my knot. Can you see that? Ensure you tie every time you sew. So I'm going to be doing this all the way till I get to the beginning of the wire. All right, please watch closely to see what I'm doing. Can you see that again? And I'm not taking my hand too far. I'm not giving it 1 inch gap. No, you need to ensure that your wire is sitting firmly on the hat brim, because you don't want a situation where it's not going to sit properly because you didn't sew it on very well. So please let your spacing be maybe 1/4 inch or 0.5 inches wide. All right, let's continue. Please watch closely, and don't forget that if you have any questions, I'm here to answer you. All right, so I'm just sewing like I started earlier, and I said don't worry about the beginning because we are sewing the wire round to go and meet, the other wire where we started from. So I'm just continuing my sewing. I want you to see, if you look closely, you see that my spacing is not so wide because I need to be very sure that the wire is sitting firmly. Okay, so I have sewn up till this point. Can you see that my thread was really long, so I didn't get any break. If you look closely, you see that my hat is taking shape already. I've sewn up until this point, and my hat brim already has strength. It's not as soft as it was the first time. So before you start anything, you need to ensure that you sew your hat wire on the brim. Okay, let's continue. All right, so now I've gotten to the end of my hat brim. So what this means is I need to take the wire across so that it crosses over the wire that started the hat. Please watch closely. Let me zoom in so you see what I'm trying to say. Okay, so I just want you to look at this close up so you can see what I'm doing. I have joined both wires together, and now I'm ensuring that I use my thread to secure both of them. Now when your wires meet, you have to cross them, take them across each other. Not let them not meet, let the heads of the wire not meet together. You have to take it across at least 2 inches extra across the beginning of the wire. Okay, so all I'm doing here is just ensuring that I sew and sew very closely. I want the thread to be very, very close. That way it's going to cover the sharp edge, the sharp pointy mouth of the wire from the beginning and to the other side. So please watch closely. So when the wires meet now, you're going to be stitching very, very close to each other. This time you're not spacing it out so much, but be very careful when you're stitching so that you don't have a very bulky feel on the end of your wire. Now once you're done stitching from the beginning where the pointy part is to the end where you are okay with your extra 2 inches, it's now time for you to cut off the excess wire. All right, so now I want to cut off the excess. So I'm comfortable with my excess, my extra 2 inches. Using my plier now, I'm going to cut off the excess and ensure that I sew and stitch down very, very well. So that way my stitching will be close. It's going to hide the wire. It's going to hold it very firmly. And it's also going to hide the pointy part of the wire. Don't forget that I said you can use a little bit of paper tape to hold the pointy part of your wire, but I don't do that because I ensure that my stitching hides the beginning of the wire, the sharp ends, very, very carefully. And how do I do that? By ensuring that I'm stitching really, really close, so every time I stitch, the thread covers the wire, and until it's completely covering the sharp points of the wire, then I stop. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. Don't forget that if you have any questions, I'm here to answer. Okay, so I'm done sewing and I have hidden all the sharp points of my wire using my needle and thread. The next step is to take my B6000 or B7000 glue and apply some of it on that the beginning part of the hat brim where I started sewing and the end. Don't forget, I'm not taking it all the way around, just this between these 2 points here. That's where I'm just putting it. And when it dries, I'll cut off my thread and tie. All right, see you in the next step.